Welcome. It's top of the hour here, 12 noon Eastern time, 9 Pacific. You're in the right place. This is Jim Gerson from CareStack. We're probably going to wait about another minute or so to get started here as people trickle in. But you're in the right place. And don't worry, your camera is on mute and so is your microphone. So you're going to be able to listen and engage with our presenter, Geri Gottlieb, and our facilitator, Teresa, Duncan. We want to encourage you to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom panel if you're using a PC. And if you're using a an Apple device, on the top of your Zoom panel to have it engage with our speakers today. So again, we'll probably wait another 30 seconds or so before we get started. All right, Geri and Teresa, I'm gonna get going if that works for you. So welcome everyone to our 12 noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific webinar today. This is Jim Gerson from CareStack. I'm thrilled to have you here as Geri Gottlieb and Teresa Duncan are gonna present on the road to dental practice administration and leadership. And believe it or not, this is the final installment of our Back to Full Swing webinar series that began in August, facilitated by Teresa. And we're excited to have you here today. We think this is a tremendous program to bring this to completion. And so just a couple quick housekeeping items, and then we're gonna get started. So intentionally, your camera and microphone are on mute, but we don't want you to sit there and have you not feel like you can engage with our speakers. There's a couple of things that you can do. For most of us, I would recommend just using the Q&A feature where you can ask questions, and Teresa will facilitate that discussion. If you really feel like you're an advanced Zoom user, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can ask a question. But you have to be an advanced Zoom user because once we unmute you, you have to also unmute yourself. But we will have time allocated at the end of the program to ask questions and make this interactive. And we really want everyone to feel comfortable participating. So Geri, if you can advance the slide one, that'd be great. So before we get started with our academic content, these are a couple shameless plugs on behalf of our two sponsors today. I'm representing CareStack. And for most of you, you may not be familiar with CareStack. And I know you can see these numbers in front of you, but the first place to start, I think, is to tell you really quickly that we're a 100% cloud-based solution for the complete management of the dental practice. And we typically work with two types of clients. The first is a dental office that's ambitious and growing. They've reopened and they see the need to offer their patients an experience where they can book appointments online, complete forms before they come in, things of that nature. And they see technologies enabling that and just don't know how to get there. The second type of client, unfortunately, they've grown frustrated and aggravated by managing a multitude of software subscriptions that layer on top of their legacy software to provide for things like patient reminders, electronic claims, online scheduling, and so forth. And these offices are just frustrated and aggravated by getting 6, 7 invoices a month, including their IT overhead as well. And in lots of cases, this keeps the ownership up and provides for sleepless nights. So if you fit into one of those two buckets, do us a favor, go to carestack.com and book a demo to learn more. So I'm going to turn it over to introduce Jeff Daly now from Darby Dental, who's our other sponsor for today's program. So Jeff, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim. And thanks everybody for joining us once again today in the final installment of this series. We're excited to partner with Geri and Teresa as they share their perspective on how to effectively embrace the responsibilities that come with leading your dental practice. The 30-second shameless plug on Darby is that what you may already know about us is that we partner with our customers to help them keep their dental supply costs down. Over the past 10 years or so, we've also been really focused on building a suite of solutions that help our customers resolve the challenges they tell us that they face on a daily basis. So today, those include things like outsourced IT services, mechanical equipment service, and a number of others. Maybe most important, given the times and what's happening in the world today, just a reminder that for our entire 70+ year history, all of our account managers have worked completely remotely with their customers. So that means no additional and unnecessary foot traffic or disruption in your practice. Our team of well-trained experts is 100% functional from the safety of their home and standing by to help dental practices in any way that we possibly can. I would encourage you, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how we can help you practice, please definitely feel free to reach out to one of our account managers. And finally, as I wrap my time in the spotlight today, I just wanted to mention that at the end of today's presentation, we have a super exciting opportunity for everyone attending today to earn a free voucher for dental supplies through Darby Dental. If you hang on through the presentation that Dan Hall from CareStack is going to give at the end of today's session, he'll give you some more details on that.
Jeff, thank you for the introduction. So yes, at the end of the program, again, it's purely optional, but if you hang out, Dan's going to give a quick overview of CareStack and present that offer to you. So thank you. So now I'm going to turn it over. Enough of the commercial, right? Let's go to Teresa Duncan, who's our facilitator for this series. And Teresa, can you please introduce Geri? Go for it. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. So we love our sponsors because it helps to bring education like this to us. So we appreciate you guys. When I had the idea to bring in somebody for leadership, I brought in Geri because she is always at the top of my list when somebody says who's somebody I can work with that is going to understand me and who's going to get me. And that's why I asked Geri to be part of this webinar. So it is the final webinar in our series. I don't want to say she's the best because we've had so many that are good, but definitely she's one of my favorites in general. She's been in dentistry for a long time, almost as long as I have. Maybe we're about neck and neck. And she has managed 2 periodontal practices along with her husband. She's been a lead coach for years. She has helped hundreds of offices. I've had the pleasure of watching her speak and connect with audience members and clients. And I not only like her style, I like her content. And I really think you're going to get a lot out of today. So without further ado, Geri, thank you so much for presenting for us today.
Yay. Thank you so much, Teresa, and for that, and Jim and everyone at CareStack and Darby Dental for really just such a kind invitation and then introduction. As Teresa said, I have been in the field of in dentistry now this is my 30th year. I know, right? I know you're sitting there thinking, no way, it can't possibly be true. It is true. I was recruited into my first dental practice 30 years ago when I was in college pursuing a degree dual degrees in psychology and music. I was working full-time, managing a Clinique cosmetic counter for Macy's in the Seattle area. I was helping a gentleman with skincare, and he said to me at the end of our, transaction time or end of our time together, he said, I'd really like for you to come work for me. And I was like, what? Well, okay, weirdo, what do you do? He was an orthodontist who had just opened a practice, and he said, I'd love to have you come and work for me. I had no idea about dentistry. I had never thought about dentistry as a career choice, or for that matter, anything aside from the fact that I had teeth and I went to the dentist to maintain those and take care of those. He hired me as an assistant, trained me as an assistant, a chairside assistant. A few months in, he said, Geri, do you have some time today after work to sit and talk about how you think it's going? At this point, what he didn't know was, number one, I had fallen in love with dentistry. I'd fallen in love with ortho at that point. I had fallen in love with being on a team, with the patients, the whole process, and I was having the time of my life. At the end of that day, he sat me down and said, tell me how you think it's going. And I'm going on and on excitedly about all the things I love about it and all the things I love about being there. And he said, and we love having you here, but I don't think assisting is your gift. And I thought, oh, no, I think I'm about to get dismissed or fired. He did not fire or dismiss me, but he said, but I think I know what is. And he moved me into the role of a treatment coordinator. So in a very short period of time, I went from, I have no idea about dentistry, to chairside assisting for an ortho, to treatment coordinating. And very shortly thereafter, I became the office manager when our current office manager sat us down and had to tell us that she would be serving 30 days in jail for embezzlement from her previous practice. We'll come back to that story. But that's where I started, and this is my 30th year. So often we are recruited. So whether you're a dentist right now who's owns a practice or thinking about owning a practice, or you're an assistant, a registered dental assistant, or a hygienist who says, I'm ready to transition out of the clinical side of dentistry into the practice administration and leadership side of dentistry. Most of us, much like me, were put in those roles because are being transitioned into those roles without a lot of training, without a lot of knowing how to run a dental business. But
Hey, Geri, I don't think you're, oh, there you go. Okay, your slide advanced. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we've been sitting on that one. And a lot of that happened during this time of COVID, right? I know we're sick of talking about COVID, but truly, Houston, we had a problem and everything kind of shut down for most of us and created some crisis, which led us to start thinking about what we're doing, who we're doing it for and with, and what might the new opportunities be to make a change in our life. And here we are. And so maybe you are in that place right now and you're thinking, how do I start? Where do I start to the road to practice management and leadership? When you are going to dental school, when you are taking courses to become a registered dental assistant and or a hygienist, right? You have a pathway. You have a curriculum. You have steps that you learn to do, right? A process. We don't have that same process or that same schooling, if you will, to become a practice administrator and or a leader. But we want to change that. And today, what I hope to do is to give you some basic understandings. If you're looking to make this transition and to become a practice administrator or leader, to own a practice, there's some basic things that you would need to know. Things that I learned the hard way because I didn't know, right? I didn't go to school to become a practice administrator. And maybe you haven't either. Or maybe even you have, but still it's a different ballgame when you actually get into a practice. As Teresa mentioned and Jim mentioned, I am Geri Gottlieb, or Gigi, as people call me, with Gigi Practice Coaching and Development. The way we approach coaching and development is exactly this, from two different sides of a practice, from the business and systems side of a practice to the leadership, the behavior, organizational health side of a practice. It takes those two things for us to be good practice administrators and leaders. And those are the things I want to talk about with you today. The first thing that you need to answer for yourself when thinking about either A, becoming a practice owner and or opening a practice, or becoming a practice administrator is this: why? Why do you want to do this, right? What is your why for becoming a manager, becoming a leader? And then what is the vision that you have for your business, for the practice, right? If you're the doctor side, what is the vision for the practice? And then does your team know that vision? If you're the practice administrator or wanting to become a practice administrator, do you know the vision of the practice and your own vision, and do they align? I start with this book with every team, with every doctor that I work with, from one of my favorite authors and speakers on leadership, and that is Patrick Lencioni from the Table Group. And my go-to book first is always the book, The Advantage. The Advantage is a leadership book unlike any other. And one of the things that the Advantage takes us through and helps us to answer are these 6 critical questions for practice leadership and administration. Number 1 is why. Why do we exist, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? The second piece of that is how do we behave? Those are the core values. So we're looking at vision and core values. How are we going to behave in this business or in this role that is going to get us to the vision that we want or that we have for the practice? What is it that we do exactly? Every practice is different. We have specialty, you range from perio, ortho, GP. So what do we do exactly? And then what are the strategies and things that we're going to need to succeed? That's those business and smart side of things. And then what do we need to be doing right now? And then do we have the right people doing the right things right now? So the first part of becoming a practice leader is knowing the vision and the core values that you have for that practice and that business and your role. But before you can actually also become a leader and a great practice administrator, you have to also ask yourself, are you a great team player? And for me, it's one of Patrick Lencioni's other books. Yes, I might be a little bit of a junkie, a follower of Patrick Lencioni, but this one has really struck me, especially during this time of COVID, this time of change, which is, am I an ideal team player? Do I have on my team ideal team players, the right team in place? Patrick Lencioni describes it as this: the ideal team player is humble, hungry, and smart. Humble, meaning not that, oh, I'm not that great, or I don't really know what I'm doing, but more that I think less about me and more about others, more about my team, more about my practice than I am worried about who I am and what I am doing. Am I hungry? Right? Am I eager to learn, to grow, to find new ways of doing things, to innovate, to learn new technology? Am I hungry for this role? Am I hungry for this career, for this path? And am I smart? Not book smart, but am I people smart? Do I know enough about people and my team, or the people that I work with, or the people that I surround myself with, to be able to help them develop and grow and become ideal team players, to help our practice grow? So one of my other go-to books is The Ideal Team Player. My associate found this for me. My associate is the lovely Kim Bates, who I think is actually on the webinar today. So, that there are levels of employees, right? Just like there's levels of leaders. But level 1 is you do what you're asked to do. Level 2 is that you think ahead. You're a level 1, so you do what you're asked to do, but you also think ahead and solve problems before they happen. And level 3 is a level 2 plus, where you are proactively looking for areas of opportunity and growth, not only for yourself, but for the business, for the practice, for your team, and you figure out ways to tap into everybody's talents to truly have a winning and successful practice and team. One of my other go-tos, and this is a book I will recommend for all of you, which is Brené Brown's book, Dare to Lead. She poses this thought, this question, and that is, who we are is how we lead. I would say that's true, wouldn't you? And I had to think about this when I was reading this, about what does that mean, who we are? Well, going back to, am I an ideal team player, right? Am I more serious, or am I more outgoing? All of the things that make up who we are is how we're going to be as a leader. So who do you want to be, right? So as an emerging or desiring practice administrator, whether you've been in dentistry for 20 plus years as a hygienist and now are transitioning to the administrative side, or whether you're brand new coming into it, recruited like I am, how and what are you going to do and seek out to learn and grow to become something that we're not just born with, and that is how we lead. How are we going to lead and manage a team? I don't know how many of you, during the initial part of the COVID shutdown, I did something I never do, and that is I watch Netflix for a short period of time, and I got hooked on the Ozarks. And when I watch TV or I watch shows, I do watch them a little bit differently, because I'm always looking at the underlying pieces. So if those of you who have watched this are going to know what I'm talking about here with the character of Ruth. Those of you that haven't, it's an illustration of growth and development from the world of Gigi. And that is that we don't start off being amazing practice administrators or amazing leaders or amazing business owners or amazing dentists or amazing hygienists or assistants. We all start somewhere. And what we need is people who believe in us, surround ourselves with people who challenge us to be better, to grow, so that we can develop. Gigi practice coaching is about growth and development. And I saw Ruth grow and develop through the course of the show in the seasons of Ozark, because Jason Bateman's character believed in her, or even if it was out of just a desperate need for someone to fill a spot, right? She went from, I live in the trailers or trailer park in the Ozarks doing nothing, to I could actually run a business. And here she is in the last photo of this series where she is dressed up and she's got a pen and a book because she's running a casino, right? That's what practice leadership is. It's growing and developing not only yourself, but others. That's the first piece. The second piece is that you've got to have the basic tactical tools in your toolbox to actually know the administrative side of a practice, right? Which starts with, do you know your software? Do you know how to use your software, not from just a clinical standpoint, but from the administrative standpoint, right? You look at softwares like CareStack and it has all of these different features. And I know from being a practice administrator and now a coach for 7 years that we never utilize all of the pieces of our software to its full advantage. It's something I'm working hard to change with my teams. But what I also know is as I watch people transition from a clinical mindset and side and use of the software to an administrative side, it's a big difference. We look at things differently and we have to, right? So you need to be able to understand your software. So you need to get training, figure out what pieces of our software, the management software that we currently have, or if you are just coming in new or seeking a new position, what do I need to know from the software standpoint administratively? Sorry, from an administrative standpoint, right? What reports, where do I look for them? How am I looking for those pieces? So training on the software that tells you how to use the software from an administrative standpoint. Sorry, I'm having to take a look at my notes here. And then are we using all of the technology that our software offers? And or like Jim mentioned earlier, we have all these auxiliary pieces of software too, and we actually don't know how they work and how they interface and how that affects us as a practice, affects us as a leader and a manager, right? So know the software, learn what you don't know. Don't assume you do know, because I promise you it's very different from the administrative side. Then we have to understand reports and key performance metrics, right? We have to know, how do we measure and be able to have conversation and communicate on the health of the business side of our practices. For clinicians, right? So I thinking about you hygienists and doctors and assistants, right? We know we have a basic benchmark and process for how we measure if someone is orally healthy or not, right? If they have periodontal disease, we have benchmarks. We know how to measure. We have particular instruments that help us check, pocket depths, gingival attachment, all kinds of things that we use to measure the health, a patient's oral health, right? If you're chairside as an assistant, we know how to take radiographs and do visual analysis of, is there decay? How is the patient health, right? How is the oral health? The same thing happens on the administrative side in a very different way, right? But we're using different tools, different instruments, if you will, right? And those instruments are our software. There are reports and these things called KPIs. You hear these things, or your metrics, right? KPI stands for key performance indicator. Just like those benchmarks clinically, we are looking at benchmarks from a business side. But if you've never been taught that, you don't understand what that language is. And then even if we know where to pull the information, so the reports, how do we interpret them? Do we know what they're telling us? Because they're telling us something, just like probing depths and bleeding are telling us something about someone's oral health. So are all of the reports. And we need to have a basic understanding of those. Some of those basic reports are production. We need to understand, how much is the practice producing, both from a gross total standpoint and a net standpoint. We need to understand the difference between those two words. Gross means all that is potential. Net, what actually happened after we had to make any adjustments, right, or write-offs. We have to understand collections and the process of collecting money into our practice. For many of us, like me, when I became a treatment coordinator, even, I had never had to talk to anybody about finances before and about the cost of treatment, right? Do we know how to do that? Do you know how to do that, right? And are you comfortable doing that? And if you're not, how can you get comfortable, right? But we have to be able to talk about numbers, talk about the numbers with our team and with our doctors. We look at adjustments. So here are just some of a few of the basic KPIs or key performance indicators, measurements that a practice administrator or leader needs to be looking at. So that's production, collection, adjustments, this thing called accounts receivable or AR, or my new favorite phrase from Teresa Duncan, which is cash flow management. Because that's it. It's how are we getting paid for the work that we're doing in our practice? And what does healthy look like? Where should that money live in our practice in the process of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Are we looking at how much treatment is being diagnosed? What are the benchmarks for that? How much treatment is being accepted? And what are the benchmarks for that? How do we know if we're doing good with those things? These are all things that you need to know as a practice administrator and learn, right? So learning these tools, and I am going to share with anybody at the end of our segment today, especially when we get to the Q&A part too, I am going to be happy to share with you terms, terminology, and how you can come to learn and understand what a key performance metric is and looks like. Right? We got to look at basic overhead. How much is it costing to actually run our practice every day? These are things that I had no idea about. And in fact, for many, many years as a practice manager, I actually had no idea about. In fact, we didn't even talk about it very often. And one of the final things, final tools, so these are just like the basic things. Leadership, how do we lead? We got to know the vision. We got to know the core values. We got to know our own vision and core values and why we're doing what we're doing. We have to understand the basic levels of how to use our softwares in our practices from an administrative side versus a clinical side. And we have to have a basic understanding and knowledge about the key performance metrics of our practice. How do we look at them? Where do we pull those reports and how do we interpret them? And then the fourth piece of that, or fifth piece, I guess, is human resources. How do we manage and talk to people, right? One of the best things that you can possibly invest in, doctors, managers, that if you did nothing else, would be to hire an HR, a professional HR firm, like a Bent Erickson or Cedar, where that can actually put together a professionally done human resource manual for you that answers lots of questions that I, as a practice manager, have to answer on a regular basis with a team. It is an amazing tool to help me do that with confidence. I got this data from my associate, Kim Bates, who is a certified HR coach, and with Ben Erickson, is that it costs on average 33% of an employee's salary to replace him or her. If we had the tools to make sure that people were successful and we're growing and developing people in our practices, we would have less employee turnover. So give your administrators, your leaders, doctors, managers, the tools that they need to be successful on this road to practice leadership and administration, right? HR manual. And remembering this is really important. So many of us want to step into this role of ownership, practice ownership, or leadership to become a leader or a manager. And we don't always stop to think, what does that actually mean besides the title? But leadership is not a position or a business title. Leadership is an action and an example. Am I the ideal team player so that I could be the ideal leader and administrator in a practice? I have to do that by being an example. The other thing, leaders, is surround yourself with talented, smart people like Teresa Duncan. I have had the pleasure of being with Teresa, knowing Teresa for several years now, and I've learned so much from her, from what she does, and how it helps what I do, right? So have mentors. You're not meant to do this alone. You're meant to grow and learn with others. Hire a coach if you need to. You probably need to. Join groups, right, that can support you, like ADOM or Facebook groups, other groups that can support you as the leader, and you can share and swap stories with. But surround yourself with people that are smart and that can support you and cheer you on. Before I close, or as I close, I want to go back to that story of when I became a practice manager. And through the years, I then became a coach. And as I was going into that journey to become a coach, I also at that time, for many years, I'd been a single mom raising 2 daughters, and I just ventured back out into the dating world and met and married my now husband, Dr. Robert Gottlieb. And I got to step into a whole new set of shoes. I had been in practice management and leadership for 20 plus years at this point. And then I stepped into a pair of ownership shoes. So this is for my owners and my practice leaders. We don't know what we don't know. And when I stepped into those ownership shoes, it almost unraveled me a little bit, in the sense that everything I thought I knew so much about the business of dentistry and running a business. And I realized there was a whole other component that I actually just never truly understood. So now in my coaching, it is part of GG Practice Coaching and Development's vision and mission to bridge the gap between practice ownership and our teams and the leaders, because there is a gap in there and we just don't know what we don't know. So ask questions, right? Help your doctors learn what they don't know. And remember your why. I'm ready for some questions.
All right. Thank you so much. Let me get my camera going here. Where did we go? There we are. Okay. So Gigi, as we were talking, I'm going to wait for questions to come up in the box there. As you were talking, I was reminded of a conversation that you and I had. You were on my podcast a little bit ago, and we were talking about the transition from not manager to manager and how that affected the relationships with people that you were shoulder to shoulder with, and now you're a little bit above because you're having to manage. What does that feel like in the mind for a new manager?
You know what? It's a for me, I'll just speaking from my own experience, and as I see it played out in my teams, when someone is promoted to that role and moved out of I was a comrade, I was a equal with you, and now I'm not. It is a hard transition to make.